Hey everyone, you're listening to the Simply Smarter podcast. Our goal is to help families navigate some of the areas surrounding the college prep process, which includes providing college and ACT-related advice, not just for students, but their families as well. This is my co-host, Caleb.
Listen each week to find out how students can score better on college placement tests, learning techniques and methods that build confidence, beat test anxiety, and identify strengths within each student.
Don't forget to stay in the know by subscribing to our podcast. Thanks for joining us on the Simply Smarter podcast as we continue our conversation with Stephen Heiner and take a look back at how Get Smarter Prep has changed over the last 10 to 15 years.
We've been bombarding Caleb with questions, so we're going to turn to Jill now. You mentioned the photo shoot, and the interesting thing about this was when you start a business, you don't have these resources that you built up over years. And so when you started the website, we just pulled some stock photos. Mm-hmm. And one day I was driving on 435 and Quintiles had an ad up with one of the kids from our website.
Oh, really?
Because it was a stock photo.
Yeah, stock photo.
It was like, come in for this study.
Oh, funny.
And I remember talking to a couple friends and said, this isn't a good look for us to also have, because we're not Quintiles, we're
right.
And then I thought, well, where would we get I didn't think where would we get students out of it, where would we get photos? And then it occurred to me, it's like, we could just take our own photos. Yeah. And then the marketing bug kicked in and says, well, if people see that their friends go here, then they want to go here. It's
right.
Like ding.
Right.
And then also the sort of Kansas City pride thing. Let's have some Kansas City landmarks.
Yes.
And one of the last photo shoots that I was a part of, we were at the Kauffman Center right after it opened. Mm-hmm. And that was a big deal, the sort of big splash. And people would see this on their manuals like, oh, I know that girl. And wow, the Kauffman Center is so cool. Yep. And
it's local.
We still have one of those photos up here.
We have one. Yeah, I know.
No, I haven't had a chance to see it yet.
We've kind of tried to revisit some of the older photo shoots, right? Because you can tell by the students' clothing a little bit. We're like, oh, maybe we should go back to Kauffman because that was how many years ago? 10 years ago?
More, maybe.
Yeah. So, yeah, there are some of those specific the Kansas City skyline, right. Some of those photo shoots that we are revisiting.
I feel that, did I miss one? You did one inside, because I'm thinking of my Facebook feed. Did you do one inside Sporting Kansas City Stadium?
Yes.
I was like, that is so cool. Who thought of that? Great idea.
So one of our tutors, Boomer, actually works in the marketing department for Sporting KC. So we reached out to him and was able to do that.
What a great idea.
Yeah, it was really fun. The kids loved it too. It was raining right before that photo shoot, and it stopped right as we kind of got there. So talking to our photographer, we're on the phone, we're like, is this going to happen? Is this going to happen? Like, you know what? I think it's going to happen. It is, and it did, and it was great. It was really great.
Well, and I'd love to hear that. I mean, for me, the photo shoot was, I didn't want to have Quintiles pictures, but then it also turned into a marketing differentiator. Like, well, you can tell we're a local company. Right. We're proud of our kids.
Yes.
And I think probably what I've seen that I probably didn't have awareness of, but it's clear that you all have, is this sort of diversity of what, the students that we have in Kansas City, and making sure that that's well represented. That's something that you look at among probably also the different outreach programs that you have, the different sort of schools that Get Smarter is working with. That what have you enjoyed doing those photo shoots? I think there are some who in the past were, they're already models, they know how to do this whole thing, and this other kid's like, do I stand here?
Oh, for sure.
How do you not look awkward in this photo? Right?
Yeah.
I'll move your arm, and they're like, I don't know what this is. And so I'm sure you probably had some of that experience too.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, there was one a few years ago. It was just very awkward for this one specific student, and it was just, the photographer tried, I tried, and we were just like, okay, just loosen up, just shake your arms out, let's just shake your arms out, let's just do that, we had to do that several times, but it was good, and we want it to be more diverse, right? Like we want to include students from all over, and I think more recently we've done that even better, so I'm really proud about that.
It goes back to that idea of water, is when you're swimming in water, you don't necessarily notice, and I think that this is something we can all learn about. I remember visiting Nigeria for the first time, and obviously billboards in Nigeria feature Nigerian women, and you're just thinking, these women are gorgeous, but I've never seen them before. for, because why would Nigerian models be normative in America? In America, they have American models. Or when I was visiting Asia, it's like, wow, look at these gorgeous models. We don't have it. And that's fine. I understand why in different countries they have people who look like them. But when you have an opportunity to then see these other people, then it's often also an opportunity for you to think differently about things. And that's what, when I've seen your photos recently, I'm like, oh, good, good check mark, and an improvement from my era, and that I wasn't thinking about that. And that I'm really glad that you all are thinking about that.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you.
What about traditional marketing? I never really did too much in the way of newspapers, television. I was always shamelessly trying to get interviewed at a news station.
I've seen your television interview. Don't be so shy.
I'm trying to write editorials for the Kansas City Star, that sort of thing. We've had so much change in technology from 2012 with geofencing. Facebook ads, all that other sort of thing. Do you feel that that's an entire section of your brain that you have to dedicate to do that for Get Smarter? Yes.
Yeah, that's a huge part of the marketing plan. Yeah, 100%.
I felt like I could hear the nod.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, 10 years ago, that was, I don't even know if that was a thing 10 years ago, right? I mean, maybe Google Ads, probably. Everyone has a Facebook page. Just kind of beginning to start that era.
Is there still the division? So Get Smarter is one of those businesses in which our client and the end user are not the same. Right?
Correct.
So the student is the end user, but they're not paying 9 times out of 10. They're not 9.9 times out of 10. They're not the ones paying.
Yes,
so
correct.
We're advertising to the parents, but with Instagram, Facebook, these other things, has there been a shift in terms of students more coming and saying, okay, I saw this Facebook ad and then mom?
Not really.
So you're reaching parents through these.
Correct. So I feel like, I think there was like a lot of high school paper ads, like newspaper ads, before my time, and that was directed to students, right? Students get the newspaper, and now we're like, well, that doesn't really make sense because we want the parents. The parents are going to be paying the invoice, and so one of our favorite things to do is our informational sessions. And I don't know if you guys did those back in your day. Okay, so that's still a really good spot for us. So we have, a parent who was really successful. Their student had really great success, whether that means a huge point increase or, we only needed 2, but he had a really great experience. Whatever that may be, it was a success story. They may have a student that is a few years younger, another student, another kid. And so we ask them to host an informational session, and they invite their friends, their neighbors, their family, anyone who's interested. And it's a word of mouth. It's a way to get in front of someone and they can ask questions. We can explain it to them. The parent has a success story that they can relate to other parents and other students. And so that's kind of one of our favorite ways to do that. And that may be old school, but it's still that interaction with a parent.
100%. And I can't take any credit for that because I was trying to get in to talk to schools, to large audiences of parents on some parent-teacher conference night. I wanted to do that. And a mom had come from Pembroke had said, well, Stephen, why don't I have a few people over at the house and I can have some tea. It's like sort of Tupperware party, but much cooler than Tupperware. And you can just have this information, fireside chat. I thought, well, that's a great idea. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then it was so successful. And she remembers telling me, she was telling me, how many people can people they're afraid, this FOMO. It's like, I'm going to miss out on this session. Right. And you create this. So that's fine. We'll do another session at your house. Yeah. Right. It's okay. You're not going to get locked out of the information.
Right.
And then you can have the sort of informational one-on-one consumer education that helps people. We forget sometimes that, the kids are nervous. Well, parents are nervous too.
100%.
And when you have those informational sessions, then we can calm the parents down, and then they realize there are professionals who do this for a living.
Yes.
Wow, that is great. Yeah. And suddenly you can watch their shoulders come down a little bit too. It's like,
because they have so many questions. I mean, especially if it's their first child, they're junior, they're, experiencing this college prep process. Like what do we need to do? We feel like we don't want to miss the boat. We don't want to act too early, but what exactly do we do? There's just like so many questions, so many question marks. And so
it might have been fed by this gossip train where people are like worried that, oh no, I'm going to miss out. And then you're there as this calm voice of information. It's been doing it for a long time. So we've got answers to your questions. Oh, that's not true. You know, what you
this
heard.
This is actually normal. This is not normal.
We are not going to allow your 7-year-old to take a practice test. That is not permitted.
Only slight exaggeration there.
Something else that hasn't changed, because I made those refusals in my era.
Man, we still refer to that whole concept of the parent echo chamber, where it just kind of bounces around and it's so different from one school to the next.
Yeah,
and it can be pretty messy.
Well, and there's positivity around that too. So during my era, that was when TCU was becoming the cool hip choice in Kansas City, and that was part of a parental echo chamber of positive experiences. My child went there. We're having a great time. We love Dallas, and then the word trickled back, and suddenly that was a hot choice. We're like, we're in Kansas. You know, what does TCU have to do with us? And we were watching that echo chamber, I think, happen in a positive way because it opened up a choice that hadn't occurred to people before. Same thing when Arkansas offered in-state tuition. It's like, Arkansas, I never thought about that. And so parental echo chamber can be positive, but the info session, I think, is the number one weapon against the disinformation, worry. What are we going to do? We have to take the test 42 times. You know, maybe the 43rd time we're going to get us like, no, you will not be taking the test 42 times. And I think part of it, they want someone pushing back who has an opinion that is informed. So you don't have to agree with us, but we're telling you from an area of expertise. We're telling you from hundreds, now probably thousands of students that Get Smarter has worked with, maybe even tens of thousands. That's what our experience is, and you can decide what you want to do with that information, and we will serve you either way.
Yes.
Yep.
So if you want to be neurotic and show up for every, help session possible, and we will do that. We will take care of you. And if you don't want to do your homework, we're still going to give you a hard time about not doing your homework because
of course
that has to happen. But
of course.
What about the podcast? That was something that was not a thing in 2012. I was doing podcasting for some nerdy side projects of my own, but I hadn't thought business podcasting was not yet a thing in 2012.
Right.
So
that's fair.
Businesses talking about their brand, looking under the hood, and people enjoying it. People didn't know how to spell podcast, right, in 2012. Like what is? And you have to explain to people like, well, it's like the radio, but on the internet.
Right.
You know? And now podcasts are so normative that I'm sure parents like, oh, that's great that you have a podcast. And so it is a wonderful weapon, because Caleb will know this from many conversations. 90% of the conversations with parents take the same track. Question number 1 gets asked. If then, it's like a choose your own adventure book. Then question number 7 gets asked. If they select A, then we go to question 12. And so what happens with podcasts is you get to encapsulate that information, and then Caleb can just have a shorter interview with a parent, say, hey, if you want to know more about that, I'll send you an email. And we actually did, episode 22 on this, and we can send that. That's such a time-saving resource for you, and then parents can get as nerdy as they want. Oh, you want to hear about the Common App? Okay, well, I'll tell you about that. But I got to take another call.
On your own time.
/ I also want to have lunch.
Yes.
Will we be seeing, I talked about the podcast, are we going to see Caleb dancing on TikTok anytime for Get Smarter TikTok, or is that off the table?
You never say never. Never say never.
Let's just say I might contribute to watch something like that happen.
I would love it. Yeah, we don't have a specific TikTok yet, but I have seen more and more businesses get them, and they can be quite clever and interesting. Personally, I don't have one either. So again, maybe it's a 2022 goal. As of today, we don't have one.
Well, and to poke a little fun, but part of the podcast, part of, let's say, having a dancing TikTok channel, the idea is business doesn't have to be boring and, okay, here's the ad. Do you want to buy or not? That part of what's fun about what we're doing today is that there's a chance to storytell and realize there are humans behind this business. There are stories, part of what any business, and that could be same thing for plumbers or electricians. They are solving problems. People depend on them. We don't ever think of a plumber until something goes wrong. But we feel that relief when it does get fixed. And I'm sure the creative ones will be taking the time to do that. Or the same thing with dentists. They'll have like some explanation of, okay, here's this. And I always marvel to see this creativity, because what happens is you're taking something that you wouldn't classify as creative. Well, I do this. I'm an accountant. It's like, well, you don't have to buy that script. it's okay to be creative and be a dentist.
Yes.
It's okay to be creative
100%.
and be an accountant. And I think that's something I love about this revolution in marketing is it's allowing storytelling to happen, and it's allowing people to get to know the business in a larger non-transactional format, and they can decide, oh, I want to do business with these people because I enjoyed that podcast episode.
Right.
I learned so much. And not only did you not have to do that phone call because the podcast did the marketing for you, but it's there forever.
Yes.
And you can just keep referring people back to that and then revisit the ones that are most listened to and say, hey, we've got some new information on that really popular episode.
Right. So ironically, you'll never guess what our most popular, maybe you have because we may have mentioned it before, but take a guess at what our most popular podcast episode is.
I don't know.
The GRE episode.
Really?
Yes, by far.
So a bunch of grad students trying to find out?
Yes. Yeah. So we had talked about that. Caleb and I had talked about that earlier, just how, all right, we need to do another GRE episode, definitely not
all right, you nerds. We know that you've been listening. We're back for part 2.
Right. But just to take a deeper dive. So yeah, I know.
And it's interesting because it will never be a major part of Get Smarter's portfolio because they're just not that many
really.
graduate students. Kansas City is not a university town in the way that other university towns, like Chicago, Los Angeles, New York. So to hear that is really interesting. But it also speaks to the fact that there will probably be some people who wouldn't naturally be Get Smarter clients because they're not from Kansas City, but if they do online tutoring and they're from other markets, and it just scored on search results.
Yeah, and a lot of our GRE students are online. So that is,
Well, and that provides great opportunity to interact with other people. I remember that happening with, let's say, one of our SAT students. Her sister was in graduate school in Los Angeles, and we ended up doing GMAT tutoring for her because the younger sibling had a greater time. And you think, oh, well, once they're in the work world, we won't ever see them again. It's like, no, we've had students come back, afterwards for grad school. Even students I've heard who become tutors.
Yes.
Which I think is, full circle, really fun.
It really is. It is. Yeah. And like, who better to teach than one of our former students? They already know a bit about the program, and they've been through a little bit of college, and a lot of them are still going through college or, have a full-time job, and this is their part-time job. And so they just love tutoring. They love helping students. So it's a great fit.
It was a great model, I think, too, for our students to see that it didn't need to be some person who was trying to figure out what we had. I'm sure that you still have it now with there's always a fun portfolio of tutors that are they're working. We have people who are working at a law firm during the day.
Yes.
And then they were paying off their student loans by tutoring at night or on the weekends. And that this is what real life looks like. And they're having conversations with people who are already in the workforce, but are not so old to not be, cool.
Right.
That they were still this basically uncle or aunt figure of, oh, okay, you aren't that old, so I can trust you.
Or an older sibling, honestly.
Right.
I mean, it would be interesting to go through the list of tutors and check the boxes and see, okay, you worked at Garmin, you worked here, you worked here, you worked here, you worked with this law firm, and go through and see how many companies that we've had, like locally.
Professions.
Definitely. FBI. Right? Was that Lyndon?
Yes.
Yeah, she works for, she did.
But I think that's part of ultimately what Test Prep is about. And people who don't know me or don't know how Get Smarter started, I didn't have Test Prep. My mom said, "There's the library. You can get a book, study by yourself." And the entire experience of Test Prep for me was something I had never had. But once I had a chance to be on the other side of it when I was teaching it, I thought this would make such a big impact. I really took to it, and I got to, as a teacher, do things that you can't do in a strict school-based curriculum. So I think in a school-based curriculum, we have to take these tests, you have to have homework, etc. I have my students, when I'm talking about I have my students, I'm talking, let's say, within the Get Smarter framework, I have them, let's say, for 10 to 12 weeks, maybe 15 weeks, maybe they come back and we work with them for essays. But I have them for this period of time, and the goal is, at a meta level, just to get them comfortable and relaxed to take this test. You already know stuff, but we're also going to go over stuff that you have written off.
Yep.
One of the things that I always joke about, speaking about the GRE, is that I always find it unfortunate, but it's just the way that we think, that people are brought into, I'm a math person or I'm a verbal person. And Test Prep changed this for me radically, because I was, my degree's in English, I write for a living. So I had very much classified myself as not a math person. But when I started to become a tutor, and I thought this might be a career, this might be something that I really do, I thought, well, I've got to get rid of those skeletons in my closet about math. So I started to study up in math, and I realized without the pressure of school that, oh, I get this. But what often, I'm a verbal person or I'm a math person, what the subtext is this is not easy for me.
Right.
So a verbal person is, math is challenging. That's what that means. I'm not a verbal person. Expressing my ideas in written format is difficult for me.
Right.
So we don't realize there's an underlying poison in classifying yourself in that way, is because it's a shadow limiting belief that, oh, I'm a verbal person, I can't get that. It's like, well, no, it's just that it's difficult, and so it's not appealing.
Right.
But if you're willing to do the work, I had to do the work because I was a tutor. But one of the fun things was breaking down those walls with students and saying, I know that you think that you're not a math person, but let's just do this trig problem. And then you'd see their eyes light up. It's like, oh, I get that.
Yeah, and so much of it has to do with the tutor, right? I mean, we had just a parent a couple of weeks ago say, our students do not want to be tutored. We have 2 boys, and they don't want to be tutored. They've had it before, and they don't want it. Started with us. Loved it. Asking for more sessions. Loved the way our tutors were teaching them. And so a tutor is really the key to everything. I mean, it makes such a huge difference.
Well, and if I can wave the Get Smarter flag a little bit as well here, that part of the issue of how Get Smarter's philosophy is the tutor-student fit, not only to how you learn, but what your goal is. We don't need, if you're not trying to get a 35, right, we don't need to do that work. I only want to jump up 4 points or whatever it might be, or I'm trying to move from 22 to 27. People don't realize, well, moving from 22 to 27 is a completely different style of tutoring and we've had, and Caleb's had them, and you've seen them, students come in at 33 and want to go to 35. A student at 33 is not missing many questions. Right. They are missing single digit. Yes. So we then are focusing on only the most difficult questions. That is a totally different style of tutoring. Yep. And well, that means we also need to pick a tutor who's going to nerd out with this fellow nerd. Right. And not that all the tutors aren't, let's say, nerds in a larger sense, but okay, this person's also an engineer, at such and such a place, and they're going to speak some language that is going to fit for you. And so 100%. Part of having a smaller business and having a focus on personalized attention and what are your goals and who is your student and what does he or she like, what is their extracurricular? Oh, he plays basketball? Okay, well, this tutor used to play basketball as well. The more you know about your student, the more points of connection you have, the easier it is to, because as a teacher, you want as many tools in your toolbox as possible. So if they're lost about, because you as a teacher, when you're in the front of the classroom, you can follow your students' eyes, and we all know the micro expressions of I get this or I don't get this. And so when you see one of your students isn't getting it, then you think, okay, well, where else am I lost? Oh, he's playing basketball. Where can I draw this from? So if I'm trying to move up court and I've got this box here, but I need to pass into, and then, you're speaking my language. I get that. So as a teacher, we're searching for that fit. And I think part of why people, quote unquote, have bad experiences with tutors is people maybe, unfortunately, who run these tutoring businesses, or if you find them on Craigslist or whatever else it might be. And Craigslist is a fine place to find people like employee number 2. I think if Gina still works here, she's like employee number 3.
She did come back. She came back for a period of time.
Yeah, she's employee number 3, found her in Craigslist. And so, but the challenge is they're not necessarily part of a philosophy. You may find a wonderful tutor or maybe 2 wonderful tutors, but they may not necessarily fit all of the kids in your family. And you need to come to a place that has this idea of students first. What are their needs? What are their goals? And then we're going to try to fit. And then sometimes we can't help you. I'm sorry, again, your 7-year-old will not be taking a practice test this Saturday. Yes. And you can go to the other companies if they will accommodate you.
Have a nice time.
But that doesn't fit with our philosophy, and that doesn't fit with what we're trying to tell you is come to us when it's time, and there's a time when it is, but it is not at 7 years old.
No, definitely not. No, I agree.
Keep working on times tables, get that cursive down.
Cursive.
We'll see.
That's the third grade.
Dating
that's the third grade. They still do that though. They cover it in the third grade, and then they get their little certificate of cursive handwriting.
I remember that, and then you never use it again as you get older.
Just for your signature.
Well, I was be impressed. You can tell someone's a teacher. They have such beautiful handwriting, and I remember just pointing out to some people, I was like, wow, where did you get that? It's like, oh, well, I'm a teacher. Yeah. Well, yeah, if you've got to practice every day for an audience, it has to be on point.
100%.
Well, we could probably talk for another couple hours.
I know, this has been so fun.
You all have to get back to work, and I have to run a bunch of errands and eat a bunch of food I don't normally get to eat.
Gain a pound this week.
Stop by Black Dog again.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for walking me down memory lane, but also I think too helping inform me and hopefully our listeners about what's changed, what stayed the same, and what they still need to keep in mind. I think the thing that hasn't changed, and talking to both you and Caleb over these episodes has reminded me that the fundamentals are still there, that we are progressing through a stage in life, and the more information we have and the more context we have, the better informed. It doesn't mean that you're going to make the right decision. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have to deal with some hard choices, but it's always better to have the information than to not have the information. And Get Smarter Prep has all the information.
All the ins and outs, all the tricks, all the strategies. I love it. Well, what a treat. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
If anybody wants to reach out to you, how do they reach out to you?
Probably, I actually have a lot of fun on Twitter and on Instagram, so at Stephen Heiner. So my first name's spelled with a PH and last name's Heiner. Feel free to message me. And if you've got any questions or you want to come visit France or Europe sometime and you want some tips, I'm happy to throw out some free knowledge.
Yes. So the next episode will be live from France.
It will not be Emily in Paris. It will be Jill in Paris.
That's right. Jill and Caleb take Paris with Stephen. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks again.
Thanks for listening to the Simply Smarter podcast. Please subscribe if you want to stay in the know about all things ACT related. Other than that, we'll see you next week.